I'm Laura.
And I'm Lowell.
Welcome to the Laura and Lowell Show.
And our guest for our interview now is Gregg Sitrin. Greg and I are old friends and haven't seen each other in 21 years since I went in April 1992 with my wife and our 2 girls to live in Jerusalem, Israel, to which I'm returning tomorrow for 2 months before coming back to New York in November and December to continue building New York's newest internet TV talk show, the Laura and Lowell Show. Laura, you want to start off with our first questions for Greg on today's issues?
Thank you, Greg, for it's such a pleasure meeting you to make the effort to come meet us here in Brooklyn.
Yeah, we're in Brooklyn and Flatbush, the Lords of Flatbush, Lords and Lady of Flatbush.
And we're near Dorman Avenue. I guess this is the Flatbush?
Yeah, East 6th Street and Dorman Square and Avenue M.
And this is
in
Flatbush.
A kosher Chinese restaurant the week before Rosh Hashanah, the Israelite New Year. For the world, the creation of the world. We have several New Years. We have the New Year for trees. This particular New Year is the New Year
also
for the world.
We need to move you over just a little
bit
so
Greg,
you can be
do a little urban renewal
on the camera. So now we can see you better.
Great.
All right.
Good. So, Greg, I'd like to ask you, what brought you to Queens? I mean, Queens is a very interesting area to live. I'm fascinated by Queens.
In my entire 53 plus years,
wow.
I grew up in the community of Flushing, which is right near where the Mets play, and the north part of Flushing.
My fiance's a Mets fan.
Yeah.
He loves the Mets.
When Shea Stadium was around, we used to go there as kids. And go to Shea Stadium, and they used to, the employees used to let when the Mets weren't there, and the Jets were playing there in those days. And we went on the field a few times and said hello. And it was a nice place. It could have been a rough place a few times. I mean, it was a little bit of everything in there. It was mixed.
Okay.
I lived in a small Jewish section. Of course, the main Jewish section was in the south.
Okay.
A large Asian section. So it was an interesting place. And now I don't live too far away. I live in a place called Bayside, which is east of there.
Okay.
A little more Long Island, suburban-like feel to it. And it's a nice. So I've been a Queens boy my entire life. I was a New York City boy my entire life.
You just said Bayside, meaning along the bay.
That's
now,
right.
I know that you work with the Red Cross. What happened in Bayside when Sandy struck New York last November? It was November, right?
Well, thankfully, the North Shore, which Bayside would be considered, not much happened there. A few people were bought. It was mostly on the South Shore, of course, Queens and the Rockaways, and Breezy Point, right to Far Rockaway and beyond into the South Shores of Nassau and Suffolk counties, and also places like Broad Channel and other areas like Howard Beach. They suffered extensive damage. And
what about where we are right now, as the Lords and Lady of Flatbush here in the Chinese restaurant?
I think in
near Dorman Square.
This area here did not sustain, other than blackouts and things like that, didn't sustain as much flood damage as if you went down towards the Bell Parkway along that area. Graveton, that area, where it's swampy sections, they were flooded out. Red Hook in that area, up in the northwest part of Brooklyn, had problems, that was flooded out. Mostly on the South Shore, that's where you had the brunt. Of course, Lower Manhattan was hit pretty hard too. Staten Island hit really hard. They had extensive damage. Actually, 30 people died there.
Where?
In Staten Island, because
yes,
they got trapped.
I heard that.
They got trapped in their homes.
That was sad.
They couldn't.
Died from lack of food and water, or freezing?
No, they drowned.
They literally drowned.
They drowned. They got hurt. They got covered, among other things. And there were similar events on Long Island, political Long Island. And just to make that clear.
What do you mean by political Long Island?
Geographic Long Island would include everything Brooklyn right out to Suffolk County. But political Long Island just includes Nassau and Suffolk counties.
Okay.
So I was assigned mostly political Long Island, Nassau and Suffolk, and also Queens. But I ended up doing work in just about every place. I did work here. I did work was in the Rockaways, and Breezy Point on. I did some work in Staten Island as well. So it was a real moving experience. First, in bulk operations, which is I learned how to drive trucks.
What's bulk operations?
That means delivering bulk, large amount supplies such as
Okay.
water.
Wow.
How many tons or pounds, when you say bulk, what's
Thousands.
the target
Wow,
audience?
really?
Like,
Target audience would be the
how many
victims.
people are we talking about in a bulk operation?
Thousands to hundreds of thousands. We're talking.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
We're talking about there were many routes. I mean,
And
everybody
they
had
need
their own route.
emergency supplies immediately.
Yeah, because they were there in their homes with
That's
no water.
Yeah.
They refused to leave because they were worried about being looted, which was
Right.
going on,
Right.
and which we actually saw, and in some cases, stopped because we just came in and chased them off
That's good.
just by being there.
Being there, right.
But National Guard did, the state police were there, and other police were there, but we went into areas, sometimes parks, sometimes people used their homes as drop sites, and everybody came. We gave water, we gave cleaning supplies, foodstuffs, and depending on the neighborhood. Say in this area we had kosher supplies, and we tried to be sensitive to the area we were in, and that went on for months. We had like 50, 60 trucks.
That's amazing.
We had people come in from Red Cross people from all over the country, and also Canada, Mexico.
Wow.
Where were the supplies coming from? From local storage depot, or they had to be brought in from larger New England
They
area?
came from different sources. They came from local distributors and also national people who it was flown in or trucked in, but they had their contracts with local people, and they were sent in to like individual warehouses, and from there to distribution sites where trucks would pick them up and then deliver to neighborhoods. And it was predominantly on the South Shore, and it was moving. I had people cry. It was just really
That's amazing what you did.
Yeah, it was just people were really amazing. People came in from all over the country to do this, and around the world actually.
Right.
For Red Cross.
That's very interesting.
And it was just, it was just a very moving experience. You got to know people. And then later on, in the recovery phase, I started doing casework, which is the point of trying to get relief assistance for the people. And so a lot of times I went to hotels and interviewed people there, as well as going into their homes. And they didn't want to leave, and there was like mold in there. And I remember in one instance, I was like, went downstairs to take a look. It was like an inch, and I actually started choking.
Yeah, you get dizzy.
I did grow up with asthma, so
I have that, and I know that feeling. You get like you're
But
lightheaded.
I sucked it up, and I just tried. I followed the people, and
that was nice. Yeah.
and we tried. I didn't control if they got it. I just was doing like the intake sections of it. So other people down the line made the decision. And that's another thing. I don't think they were changing the guidelines. At different levels, and it was our age, so it wasn't just the Red Cross.
Right.
So I think maybe some more people who should have been assisted than were, but that's, just my opinion. And it was very moving, and then later on I spread into, I went to Breezy Point, I went to the Rockaways, I went all over, trying to help these people out. But it was a team effort, it wasn't just one person, there are people doing it now. There are people helping out. A lot of different organizations are involved with it. And just because now you don't really see it every now and then on the news, it's still going on every day. And just people still suffering. And we're right again in the hurricane season for this year, so it could happen anytime.
It is scary.
Let's take that point, which is that it could happen 20 minutes from now, then all of a sudden, boom.
Any one of these natural depressions could turn. It comes out of Africa. Out of the Sahara Desert, and they conform with the heat, the cold, and again, it's opposites fighting with each other, cold and hot. And anyone could form into a storm, and it can
within
go anywhere.
minutes.
Well, I wouldn't say minutes, maybe days.
When Sandy struck, what lead time was there between the formation of the storm and it striking New York?
I'd say it could take maybe a week or so between it gets across the Atlantic. And then not only that, depending on the conditions where it can build up momentum, wind speed. See, the funny thing about it is this Hurricane Sandy, which I call it, is officially known as Super Storm Sandy because it didn't attain the mile per hour speed that a hurricane would get, so it was downgrade. But the reality is it was a hurricane. I don't get the semantics and stuff like that. It's just ridiculous. So it can go anywhere. It's just like it could go into the Caribbean, it can go to Florida, go from like New Orleans, got hit with Katrina. or it can go off the coast and then bounce out, like how often happens off the Carolinas. Or in this case, the rarity, it just came straight up and hit us direct.
And when it hit New York, how long did it take from point of impact until New York got, how long does something like that take until you have scenes like we saw in Jerusalem on the internet where cars are floating on 14th Street?
Well, the main part, the main section, of course, you get the beginning ends of it hitting, or the winds and the rain start picking up. But it's the 24-hour period when it's directly, the eye is close, where you start seeing the extreme part. And when the winds are at its highest and the rain is at its, you know, it depends on what side of the, you know, storm you're on. You know, you get more wind or more rain. But either way, it was so bad. That's when you get the most. When in the case like the Hudson River was backed up, you have all Staten Island, all the coastal areas, of course, also the Jersey Shore, which was a different, different. And that's what happens. That period, it's just amazing. The downpour and the wind velocity can just cause so much damage so quickly.
Point of beginning to point of end, how many hours did it take until it was over? From the point that contact began, boom, the storm hits New York, boom. Well, at what point was it done?
That's a two-part question.
A day, 2 days?
The heavy section, the heavy period of destructive winds and rain was done by the following morning.
Within 1 day?
Yeah, that's all it is. It's a tough question. The first impact could have been a few days before. We knew this was going to be a direct hit, and we started preparing for it 4 or 5 days before. We started getting shelters ready, and you know, through a great, I gotta say, through AmeriCorps, I did that for 2 years.
Through what?
The federal program, AmeriCorps.
What's AmeriCorps?
AmeriCorps is a federal program.
It was. It doesn't.
It still exists. Still exists, and it's along like with Vista and. Where you work in an organization, and of course I have to work in American Red Cross, usually for 1-year contracts, and you do good. I mean, you're actually you're an employee of that, technically an employee of that agency you're working at for that period of time. Although you're also AmeriCorps, which is a federal agency, it has its own inspector general and everything. So it's a fine line, like Vista would be a little different. So that's what you are. You're considered like a volunteer in some ways, but you're actually working for them because
AmeriCorps. And Vista is another...
Yeah, Vista is a program which could be affiliated with AmeriCorps. It's a federal program. It's sort of like a domestic Peace Corps, if you want to call it that. It's very good. I was doing it through that, and I had my 2 1-year contracts, and it was very rewarding. You know, and I'm glad. I wish I could have done a lot more, but you know, I did what I did. I helped maybe indirectly, you know, tens of thousands of people. So
I want to add a note here about what you just said, which is typical of a mindset such as yours, and I wish it was more common. And then I've been hogging the questions and comments, so I'll hand it over to Laura, who has a lifetime experience helping other people. You said, I wish I could have done a lot more. Oscar Schindler, at the end of the movie, and apparently this really happens, when they drive up the car for him to go away with a letter from the prisoners he saved, he breaks down and cries and said, what do I need the car for? I could have saved 2, 3, 4, 5 more people. Never mind, he saved 1,500. He breaks down and cries. Apparently, this really happened. This is not Hollywood. This is Hollywood telling the truth. And another truth I heard in a lecture in Dobbs Ferry on Holocaust Day, Yom HaShoah, in April of 2012. The son of the Bielski brother, one of the Abraham Bielski, the partisan, the Bielski partisans took in 2,000 refugees in the forests of Belarusia, I think, the Pripyat marshes, I think that's where they're called. And they were a unique partisan group because they took in women and children, not just fighters. They didn't turn them away. So the son who gave the lecture said, in one of the last conversations with his dad, who was a larger-than-life person with his brother, ran this incredible operation, which is the subject of a movie starring Daniel Craig and Liev Schreiber. Said, Dad, look what you did. And the father said, I could have saved more people. It's just this mentality. I could have done more. I could have done more, just like you're saying. It's very touching to hear.
Thank you, but that's how I feel. And you know, I could probably say a few other things, but I better not, because I don't want to, you know, some of the controversial things. I mentioned before that, you know, with the guidelines, and I think it could have been handled better. But this was a first-time situation. This program didn't exist before, even with other storms, even with Katrina. So it was kind of unique. So I'm willing to give them that, but I think more people could have been serviced and helped, and I'll just leave it at that. With that.
Laura, I've been hogging the questions in the comments. What do you want to ask or say?
Sure, Greg. You had shared you had worked with OTB. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? I find it very OTB.
Well, New York City Off Track Betting Corporation. I worked there for 29 years, and it's known as a public benefit corporation where people wage, you know, bet on horse racing. You know, different tracks, both locally, you know, and around the country, and internationally in some cases. And it was, you know, it was designed to help, you know, gain the state money and I think the city money for like education and things like that, sort of like the way the lottery is.
Right.
But over the years, unfortunately, we were required to pay out more and more and more to different entities, including the horse racing industry, even tracks who had casinos who were making more money than us. So of course, basic business 101, if you're forced to pay out more than you're taking in, you're going to fail. You know, and it seems pretty simple, and it could have been corrected pretty easily, but for different reasons it wasn't, and I can't get into that. But we've been threatened, you know, over the last, you know, say the place shut down December 7, 2010. But we were kind of threatened over the years.
December 7th, that was Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, that was our sinking right there, our Pearl Harbor.
A day that will live in infamy.
Yes, indeed. And for many people who did. Now,
where were your offices for the OTB?
The corporate headquarters were in Times Square, the old Paramount Theater building, 1501 Broadway, and we had branch offices all throughout the 5 boroughs. And basically, without all the hands in our pants, we were very profitable. But how it turned out in the end...
what do you mean by hands in our pants?
Well, people we had to pay out. Legal
payouts?
Legal pay... Well, yeah, we'll stick with the legal payout. I don't know about any... There may have been some other stuff going on, but I don't know anything about that. But, but just the legal stuff was bad enough.
Remember... Hogan's Heroes, Sergeant Schultz.
Yeah.
Whenever there was a situation that was a little bit spicy, I see nothing, I hear nothing, I know nothing. And I discovered from my own experience in the last year or two, sometimes that's actually a very good attitude to have for your short and long-term survival.
Yes, in this case, that's very much so.
This is Sergeant Schultz. And listen to Greg. I'm listening now.
It's a comedy away there, but the reality is it's a very sad hard fact that when it came down to the, you know, other people were started being laid off before that throughout the year. People I worked laid off, fired earlier in the year and before that, and that was hurtful as enough. And like I said, then we had this guy come in, Gregg Sitrin, who was a liquidation expert, if you want to call him that, and he came up with a plan to save the corporation. They were restructuring, but a lot of people, again, would have been thrown out. So it went up to the state legislature, and for political reasons, basically they turned it down. I mean, I want to give compliments to Joseph Adabo, who really tried to help us out.
To who?
Senator Joseph Adabo.
Is he still senator?
I believe so. I'm not 100% sure.
Republican, Democrat, or other?
So I think he's Democrat, but I'm not sure. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry about that.
Don't be insulted, Senator Adabo.
So he counted the effect of, you know, basically 3 guys: Dean Skelos, Marty Golden, and Andrew Lanza. In fact, Marty Golden, I think, is right neighboring of this district, and they kind of were instrumental in seeing this, the plan get knocked down. The plan was imperfect. Obviously, it was down, but the corporation would have been saved. But, you know, it was bad that a lot of people were already fired and in the process. Well, ultimately, all 1,100 people were let go. And the union tried to do it good, because a lot of my fellow co-workers will probably yell at me for that. District Council 37, and the managers union was Teamsters union. But still, you know, it could have been saved in some way. but it wasn't. We were up there in Albany that night, December 7th, in the hall. It actually got more votes in favor, but it didn't reach the percentage it needed. So
did it need a 2/3 majority?
Something like that, it did. And it didn't achieve that, and they knew it wouldn't achieve that. And there we are, just sit there with empty faces. It was a cold Albany winter day. And
raw, cold.
I remember it just felt like, yeah, and it was just like...
That's so sad.
And then 3 days later, people were off the job. They were working right at that very moment, and they all left. And 3 days later, I was laid off, and just about the rest of the people. We had a small skeleton, security staff stay on after that. But all 1,100 people were out, and people lost their benefits. And I can't tell you, some people say it's coincidence, but I'm telling you, literally telling you, dozens of my former co-workers died from not having adequate medical care.
That's so sad.
And it took forever. It took forever until we finally, people in New York State who live in New York State got Medicaid.
That's just sad.
Well, but there are people who, if you're not old enough to get Medicare, and you lived outside, if you worked in Manhattan, you lived in New Jersey, which you were allowed to do, you're out of luck. If you went away to Florida or somewhere else, you're out of luck. So there's ways trying it, but it's not going to happen. So it was a real travesty, a real disgrace, and now these same three who I named will now say, oh, it was a mistake, and something should be done. They were instrumental in the ways of trying to get us to Medicaid along with the rest of the legislature. But it was done for no reason. It was allowed to happen for no reason. These people are suffering, dying, and now the government has lost all that money. So the whole thing was a big disgrace, a big fiasco, and it's criminal, actually.
It is criminal. But you're here to tell the story, and that's why we have this show, because this is true, folks. This is what went on, and I think it's important to know the truth, and we tell the truth. We'll have the New York's Emotional Emergency Room here.
That's what we're calling our show, New York's Emotional Emergency Room.
Yes, folks, they're really...
Thank you.
And we are helping New Yorkers share our stories with the world, and sometimes those stories are stories of pain. And
well said.
Whatever the stories are, they are. I'll share, just want to add a story of my little story of my own about what you're saying. I was, a year before we went to Israel, my wife and I and our two girls, I worked for Reuters Information Services for half a year in the marketing department and half a year in editorial, which ended up being financial news, which was, I had no background in finance, but there was an opening, they liked me, so I got the job. When Reuters no longer exists, it's now Reuters Thompson. Reuters, the internet came along, like horses and buggies and cars, the internet slaughtered the financial news services. You could get the same thing for a fraction of the price for free. There was Dow Jones. Bloomberg was coming up. That Bloomberg Information Services was coming up fast then. When I was there in the financial news, I was told explicitly, I didn't have to interpret or intuit it. We do not use two words. We never say people are fired. The chief financial officers of the companies that pay us tremendous fees for our services don't like it, because it's true. We use a euphemism. We say they were let go, or downsized, or made redundant, or there was a restructuring. I have a personal war against euphemisms. I don't like them. I prefer calling things what they are. And in the long run, I think that's better.
I think
yes, I agree with
so
that.
We were told, if you use the word fired in a story, the editor will simply rewrite it. And we were not allowed to use another word, depression. America was always forever to be in recession and recovery. Even though America was at that time in depression, economically, I remember one reporter smile and say, look in the textbook definition. 2 downturns in the business cycle, whatever it is, and some other kid says, well, what do we have? That's it. And as far as I can see, looking at the American economy now, I think America's in a depression now. There is no recession and there is no recovery. There may be in certain small sectors, and you're not allowed to say that because it's true, and that frightens people. I think it's better to tell the truth, because sooner or later you can fool some of the people all of the time and all of the people some of the time, as Abraham Lincoln said. But you can't fool all of the people all of the time. And when the fix of the lying and the pretending and the make-believe wears off, you can have a real day of the locusts, and that is not a pleasant situation for society. It's better to get used to speaking truthfully and hearing the truth in small doses, and problems can be fixed when they're small until they become so big that it's Halloween, and you don't want that. America doesn't want that. And that's what I was thinking when you mentioned what happened to off-track betting. And I know that Laura knows a similar situation with Mount Vincent's.
St. Vincent's Hospital in Greenwich Village. It's same story.
Yeah, that was really...
That was a tragedy.
Nuns trusted a group of men to take it over. They stole money, and it collapsed.
And the community needed that hospital, and now they don't have that hospital in the area.
So we'll do our job. We're here in Flatbush, go around New York, help people share our stories with the world. Some of them will be feel-good, heartwarming stories, and others will not. But people will be telling their truths. If you don't like to watch it, change the channel.
Yeah.
But that's what you get from us.
That's what you will get. Thank you.
Greg, Laura, any other questions or comments?
I just want to say, Greg, it was so inspirational and educational. And you also are an archaeology
Yes, I like
historian, and I learned a lot about Israel with you this afternoon, and I'm ready for my trip to Israel, and you made it come alive.
I'm ready to go home tomorrow for 2 months. And Greg and I are having a reunion for the first time in 22 years.
We met through a great guy named David Horowitz.
In the future interviews with Greg, we're going to talk about David Horowitz, who was a journalist at the United Nations and died at the age of 99.
That's right.
18 years ago?
2003, I believe. Yeah, it was 2003. And he's buried up in Westchester County.
10 years ago. So we thank our viewers for watching and listening. And for those of you who are Jewish, we wish you a Shabbat Shalom and a Shana Tova. Next week is Rosh Hashanah, the Israelite New Year for 5774.
Shana Tova.
Thank you. Shana Tova.